Hi, everyone. I am absolutely rabid for today's interview. I am so excited to welcome Ann P. Mitchell. She's an attorney, law professor, a law dean emeritus. I got to say that right. Legal journalist, and was one of the first two attorneys in the United States advocating for kids to have an ongoing relationship with their father after separation, which she calls disuniting of the family. And she actually was the one who introduced the term co-parenting. So I already told, we barely got today's interview started because we were doing so much talking offline. I know I'm probably going to have to cut it off at some point, and we're definitely going to have her back because there's so much to talk about. But before, Anne, you officially introduce yourself, if I didn't already say the gist of it, how common from your past, because I know you've been out of private practice for a while, are relationships that rupture post separation? How often do you see this, or did you see this?
By rupture, do you mean kind of erupt?
Yeah, well, erupt is probably most of the time, but where a child is almost encouraged to not want to see the other parent.
Oh gosh. So you're talking about basically parental alienation.
Right.
And it's sadly all too common still. Although, even one instance is too much. So, but yeah, it's still all too common. The thing is that a lot of time the alienating parent doesn't even realize what they're doing. It's just innate. And which makes it harder, to address because they're like, I'm not doing that. So yeah, pretty common.
Yeah. And I think I talked to a therapist once who said everybody does alienating behaviors, especially at the beginning. Most of the time, people have no idea what they're doing, but just because they're doing it doesn't mean that a child then turns against the other parent, because there's a lot of factors involved. But before we even continue, Aunt, why don't you officially introduce yourself?
You did a great job, Lisa.
What did
But
I forget? I feel like you wear so many hats.
it is true that I was one of the first two attorneys in the U.S. to address head on the issue of fathers and children's rights, by which I mean the rights of the children to have an ongoing relationship with their dad. The other was Jeffrey Leving out of Chicago, with whom you may be familiar. And I actually got involved in that even before I went to law school. So back in quite a long time ago, in our state of New York, that where I'm from originally, there was an effort to I want to make this very brief. The federal government had basically said, hey, states, if you want to keep receiving AFDC welfare funds, then you need to put into place child support formulas, because at the time it was kind of like the Wild West. There were no child support formulas. Every judge in every state was just kind of winging it. And so there were very disparate child support awards. And so the feds just said, you're going to have to do this if you want to keep receiving federal funds. And so in New York, there was a law being introduced to do the child support formula, and it was incredibly onerous. Particularly there were two parts of it. One was that the judge would have no discretion whatsoever to vary the formula, to veer from the formula for extenuating circumstances. And the other was that it would have been retroactive. In other words, that the formula would be applied to already done court cases. So you would have fathers go overwhelmingly. It's, back then, at least, it was non-custodial parents were the fathers. You would have these fathers who had been paying their support on time for years suddenly hit with a recalculated support amount in arrears. And it was an attorney who told me that. I was not an attorney at the time. I was an undergrad, but this attorney told me this. And here's what happened. I had just gone through my own divorce. It was fairly a little contentious, I'd say. But we were done. And he had just lost his job, and his new girlfriend was pregnant. And as this lawyer is telling me this, I am thinking about, like, my God, I could bankrupt him.
Mm-hmm.
with this proposed law. And for a moment, Lisa, that was really tempting to me. And then I like snapped out of it and I thought, my God, we're already done. And yet this was really tempting for me to try and destroy this man for just a split second.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next moment I thought, I don't know, I have no idea how I was able to have this come into my head, but I thought, this is going to hurt children because the dads who are paying their support on time, faithfully, are going to suddenly be underwater. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to like disappear because they're not going to be, they're suddenly turned into scofflaws. And I said to this attorney, I said, "Oh my God, that's horrible. Somebody has to do something. We have to have have a citizen, recall or petition." I was very politically naive at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Poor child, we don't have such a thing in New York." And so I said, "Well, someone has to do something and I'm going to do it." And so I started what I called a father's rights group. It was actually, for the kids. And we convoyed up to Albany and we testified. And the power, I think, of having a single custodial mother come up to the podium. So, all the legislators were like, "Oh, yeah, here's another mother talking. She's going to complain about child support." And then I said, "I'm here representing the fathers." They were like, "Wait, what?" And then they paid attention. Um, anyway, that's how I got involved.
Wow. Wow. I thought you were going to talk about this other topic that we started talking about, which is fine because that's fascinating. And that is why you thinks that the issue of active ongoing contact with both parents is so important. Usually there's some kind of personal thing that makes someone really, I mean, you were one of the first two lawyers, even though you helped dads, things were different during that time. And,
Right.
we have male and female clients from all over the world. A parent turning a child against the other is a really big issue, and alienation is a huge theme with our clients, whether it's male or female, where one parent
Right.
tries to cut the other parent out. And so we often talk about how important it is, barring extreme abuse, neglect, but you need findings for that, but that a child is still half of that other person. So for you, why is active ongoing contact why are you so passionate about this?
Well, I mean, for one thing, if you just think about nobody grows up hoping to, get married and then divorced. Everybody wants to have a family with two parents. And, most people. So people recognize how important that is. And that doesn't change when the family disunites. It's two parents still, they're just living in two different places. And I think we've come quite a ways since, when I first got involved. Back then, fathers were referred to as visitors.
Mm,
I mean, mothers as well, but it was, overwhelmingly fathers back then who were the custodial or non-custodial parents. So I think that, I am not a psychologist, but I mean, any psychologist will tell you, that having a loving, available relationship with both parents is paramount to a child growing up well adjusted and happy and healthy, and all those sorts of things. So, one of the things that I really try to impress on people is that when you go through a divorce and you have children, you are modeling for your children how to be in divorce. And think a minute about what you want for your grandchildren. Do you want your grandchildren to be going through an acrimonious divorce with your grown children? Or do you want to model getting along so that your grandchildren, because the odds are good that your kids are going to grow up and get divorced at least once. That's just the odds.
yeah,
So
it's
what kind
amazing
of
to
divorce
think
do you
about
want
that.
your grandchildren to have to endure?
Mm, yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of people make mistakes at the beginning. A lot of people think this is never going to happen. My ex would never sink this low. What are some other mistakes that you have seen over the years that people make, whether it's ideologically, or what they do, which ends up making things worse?
So let me tell you, I don't know if this is answering your question straight on or not, but you
Okay.
saw me laugh because
Yeah.
So back when I was in private practice, I represented non-custodial disenfranchised dads. Um, Partly because there were a lot of people who were representing moms, right? Moms at that time had a lot of support,
Mhm.
whereas single dads just didn't. And I became very good at, unfortunately, with the high conflict cases, there were often false allegations of abuse leveled against dads.
That's
Again,
so still.
dads also level them against moms. This is just, my clients.
Mhm.
And I became very good at seeing the signs that someone was going to level a false allegation of abuse. And so I would tell my guys, look, this is coming down the pike. And here's what you need to do to make sure that you are able to just quickly, you know, get rid of it. And every time they said, "Oh, she would never do that. She
Mm.
would never ever do that. I mean, she may be angry or we may, not be able to be married anymore, but she would never say that I abused our child." And sure enough, every single time that happened. And we were talking before, and I mentioned to you that I had, this one particular case, which is where co-parent counseling comes in,
Mhm.
where I was seeing those signs. And thank goodness I always had a very good relationship with opposing counsel. And
That's amazing. That's
well,
not the same these days, unfortunately.
I mean, it can be. It doesn't have to be that way behind the scenes.
Mm.
But a lot of people expect their lawyers to not get along with the lawyer on the other side. They just expect that, which is a wrong way to look at it because, especially again back then, especially non-custodial parents did not do well if you had to actually go to court and litigate. It was always much better, especially for the children, if you could come to some kind of a compromise and accommodation outside of court, which requires you to be able to have a good relationship with opposing counsel. But
Mhm.
anyway, in this particular case, opposing counsel and I had a very good relationship. And he actually contacted me and he said, "Anne, hey, mom just gave me this videotape of the child complaining that dad's new girlfriend was abusing her."
Mm.
Number one, that's where a lot of allegations end up being triggered, is when the other parent has a new partner. So
Mhm.
anyway, so he said, "Do you want to come over and watch this video with me?" And I said, "Yes, thank you for calling me. That I would like to." And we watched this video, and it was taped over like 5 days. And the little girl was maybe 3 years old, and you could see the timestamps on the tape. So you could see where the progression of the days. And in the beginning, the little girl is just like jumping over the couches. She's very active. She seems really happy. And then by the end of the tape, you see her like whimpering, holding her back. But over the course of the days, what you hear is mom saying, "Show me where dad's new girlfriend hurt you.
Mhm.
Show me where she hit you." So she's actually coaching her child to say these things. Um, so my point being is that we got them into co-parent counseling. I went in, I filed a motion to require mom to attend co-parent counseling. The order was issued. They went into co-parent counseling where no one was around except them and the therapist, so that there were no outside influences trying to pressure, maybe even well-meaning, one or the other to, like screw that person to the wall or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and in co-parent counseling, they got it all worked out and came up with a plan, and mom felt heard and dad didn't feel attacked, and it was great.
Yeah. Oh, so I wanted to ask you about co-parenting or co-parent counseling, but before that, you mentioned something that I know you also included in your book. Why don't you tell people what the title of that book is, and then the signs that someone is probably going to hit you with false allegations, because our clients' worlds are full of false allegations, and it's terrifying.
So Okay, the name of my book is, and again, people, you need to remember that back then this was the focus of my law practice. So it's They're Your Kids Too, The Single Father's Guide for Defending Your, gosh, I can't read, parenthood?
Yeah, I think it was your
Fatherhood?
parenting rights
The
in
single,
a broken system.
in a broken family law system, The
Yeah.
Single Father's Guide to Defending Your Father. I think it's Fatherhood in a Broken Family Law System. I should have had a copy of my book here. I could have held it up. Um, the signs that a false allegation is likely to happen are really the things that lead up to it. So all of this, all of the acrimony, or at least 90% of any acrimony, is about control.
Mhm.
And the more that the person trying to retain control and gatekeep to the child, the more they are thwarted, especially by the court. So, for example, one parent wants full custody, and the court says, no, joint custody, and you're not going to be able to keep, the other parent from seeing your children. The more that is thwarted, the more out of control that parent gets, because they're trying to keep control, right? And it's like slipping through their hand.
Yeah.
And they think, for whatever reason, they're the better parent, or the other parent is a no good SOB, or they're really mad at the other parent for having an affair. Whatever is the case, it's about control. So when you see the other parent starting to sort of ratchet it up and start spinning out of control, the natural conclusion to that, like we used to call it the nuclear option, or the mother of all, options, is the false allegation of abuse.
Mhm.
Because, that sort of immediately puts the brakes on everything. And, suddenly now there's only supervised timeshare. There's only, so it's very satisfying to the parent who's trying to keep control. So when that starts happening, what I would tell my guys, and this is in the book, is, and again, it was always guys in my case, but it applies to both parents, and my book applies to both parents. Um, I would say, look, you may think this is overkill, but here's what you need to do for the foreseeable future. Never be alone with your child. If you family bed, you need to stop for now. If you shower with your child or bathe with your child, you need to stop for now. You basically need to be sure that when this goes to court, if it reaches that natural conclusion of them, saying, hey, they abused our child, that you can easily prove that you did not, because and you had no opportunity to, because you always had someone else there with you as a witness, and you never did. You stopped doing the family bed, you stopped showering together, these things that when you were an intact family, you know, both parents thought, look at us, we're such great parents. Like I family bedded myself. I totally get it. But it's just something that needs to be done for a little while, so that there is no ammunition. And that is when my clients would say, oh, she would never do that. And then, of course, she did it. But the ones that had followed my advice, like, we were able to go right into court and say, look, Your Honor, this is a specious allegation. In fact, he's never even been alone with the child for the last month or whatever period of time.
Are
Does that
there
answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And also, I remember seeing that there were certain types of people who are more likely to make a false allegation. I think I remember something about a parent who dealt with their own serious trauma is more likely to make false allegations. But
Yeah, I mean, I don't really touch on that very much,
yeah.
because again, I'm not a psychologist,
Uh-huh.
but I that certainly can be true, and especially if the person making the allegation was abused themselves as a
Mhm.
child, in part because that colors how they see the world, that colors what they expect of the that parent figure. So I don't honestly know now in the 2020s whether false allegations still happen at the same level that they did.
Uh, Absolutely 100%. Have you heard of the silver bullet strategy?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, Anne. Well, I'm excited to teach you something for today. But it's a strategy that's being pitched by certain law professionals to women in particular that says if you're splitting up and you want a leg up in custody, file for a restraining order. And that
Oh
way
yeah,
it'll set the foundation and then you'll do better. And a lot of people are doing this. And it's mostly women against men. And we've met people who
yeah,
told us in our first call, I talked to a lawyer or I was watching something online and they said that I should do this. And I was just like, that is so dangerous. As a domestic violence advocate, my background as well, like the impact this is going to have on your case, on your children, on the family system, you can't even imagine. It is, please don't do that. It's not worth it.
yeah. So I mean, that was very common back when I was in private practice as well. It just didn't have a catchy name, I guess.
Yeah.
But in fact, there were certain states, and Massachusetts comes to mind, where at that time a woman could go into court, her husband not even knowing that there was a divorce in the offing. She could go to court and get a TRO by
Mhm.
merely saying she was worried that he might get angry when she told him she wanted a divorce, and she would get the TRO. And so husband would come home from work and find like all his stuff on the front lawn and a restraining order prohibiting him from even going in his own home. Oh,
Mhm.
so we used to call that divorce by TRO, that Massachusetts was just notorious for that. So I'm sad to hear that that is still going on at the same, rate, or maybe even accelerated.
Mhm.
California, which is where I practice and where I'm still licensed, actually started, uh, if you were able to prove that the allegation was false, that was an almost automatic change of custody from
Wow.
the alleging parent to the targeted parent. I would imagine that is still the case in California. I would hope it is the case in a lot of other states, and if not, it needs to be. I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't
it's
think
hard
it's
to
the case.
prove.
I don't think it's the case because we have a lot of clients. We have one in particular in one of the states that you mentioned whose ex, he's a male, his ex is female. His ex has filed 19, there have been 19 unfounded CPS cases against him, and it's unbelievable. Massachusetts has passed some coercive control laws that are supposed to really look at the impact that it has on a child to be put through the examinations that come with false allegations of abuse.
Oh,
Um,
especially of sexual abuse. I mean, very intimate examinations in the
right,
children. It's horrible.
right, right. Yeah.
So if
So,
you ever have any clients in
mhm.
Northern California,
Oh, we have a lot in Northern California.
I still can, I can certainly recommend some very good attorneys out there.
Oh, good. Okay, that's really good to know. All
Yeah.
right. So let's now talk about co-parent or co-parenting counseling.
Yes.
What does it mean and when is it usually ordered? I'm setting you up for something because of what we usually see, and I'll tell you about that. But
I
what is
feel
it?
so
What does it
set up, Lisa.
mean?
So back, again, back in California when I was in private practice, I met this phenomenal MFCC. That's a family children's therapist for people who don't know what that MFCC means. Her name is Carol Marks. I believe she's retired now, but she actually was an expert in false memory syndrome, and we met. If I recall correctly, we met at a conference at the FMS False Memory Syndrome conference, and we, just instantly became fast friends. We clicked.
Mhm.
And between the two of us together, we developed a model for what we called co-parent counseling. And my clients, you know, when we proposed this, especially when it was new, like we would propose it to opposing counsel, we very quickly realized that the moms thought maybe this was a way that he's trying to get back together with me. So we made very clear, this is not marriage counseling. This is not pre-divorce counseling. There's no desire to get back together. What this is a place where the two parents, estranged parents or separated parents, can sit down without the influence. A lot of times, both sides, first of all, it's so sad that we have to say sides, right? Because this should be a cohesive family unit still. They're two parents that live in two different places, right? But it becomes sides when it's conflicted or even highly conflicted. And people are human. They want to feel heard. So they will talk to their friends and they will talk to their family, and they will say, she's such a blah, 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 or he's such a stingy, all he cares about, he's trying to keep money, and then the family and friends will want to, affirm them. And so they will say, yeah, well, you can't let him get away with that. And, you should, screw that bitch and nail him to the wall. Right. And they think they're being helpful, but what they're doing is they're fomenting that high conflict. So co-parent counseling isolates the two parents with the counselor so that they can be real, so that they can bring the temperature down and actually start talking to each other as co-parents respectfully, out of the earshot and influence of the world around them. And it's very, very successful. And it's also something that you can have, your lawyer ask the court to order, because it's a very reasonable thing to request. First, of course, what you do is you have your lawyer ask their lawyer, look, would you be willing to participate in co-parent counseling? And the other thing you can do is you can say, oh, my dog might be starting to bark. I apologize if so.
No, don't hear it. That's fine.
You can say, look, here are 3 different therapists that we've found that have good, have a good reputation. Your client, the other person, let them choose. And if they don't like any of these 3, then they can propose 3. Either way, it lets the other person on the other side feel like they have control. Yeah, right? They're not being told what to do. They actually get to choose the therapist, right?
Yeah, Chris has an idea. He came up with this term about cutting the cake. He said it's like at a kid's birthday party where it's like one person cuts and the other chooses.
Right.
So it's the same idea.
Right. And so then if they reject that overture, if the other side says, no, I'm not going to counseling, well, it's such a reasonable request that at that point, because clearly you're going to end up back in court because this is a high conflict case, you can go to the judge and file a motion to have that parent ordered to participate in co-parent counseling. And you can say, look how reasonable this person is being. They're just trying to get into a therapist so that they can work out their own agreement. Courts absolutely hate to have to make decisions that impact families. They want the parents to come to some sort of agreement themselves. So I have never had a judge reject that motion.
All right. So this is awesome. It kind of fits with the idea that Chris and I are already thinking about for our next book, which has to do with parallel parenting that's child focused. While we were at this AFCC conference, they talked about a model that sounds a bit like yours. And when I said I'm setting you up for something, this was the setup. It's not really a setup. But I was going to say, when I said, when is it usually ordered? In most situations that we see these days, is co-parenting counseling is ordered after a divorce or after there's been tremendous high conflict, where it's like, okay, what are we going to do when we can't make decisions together? And it says joint legal decision making. We'll do a parenting coordinator. We'll do co-parenting counseling, but it's late in the game. So at the AFCC conference, there were 2 women who had developed this sort of model that hasn't been put into practice, but it sounds like you had put it into practice decades ago, where they said when a family separates or falls apart basically, or it has to restructure. So instead of having immediately go to the legal stuff, which is what we do, that's very directive of like, we need to come up with a parenting plan, we need to do a schedule and have all these rules, to instead have an IFS or internal family systems therapist as a co-parenting counselor work with the family before we start getting to like making permanent schedules and things, deal with the grief, deal with the parent-child contact problems, which often happen in these cases, and work with the family to figure out what their culture has been, understand that certain people in roles have to step down from those roles maybe a bit, and certain people have to pick up new responsibilities because, again, the family's restructuring. And so by doing it this way, it also helps preserve the parental hierarchy, which means that with everyone involved, the kids too, because it's a family system, even though it's changed, it's almost like there's certain rules, not external rules, but things that we've been doing in our family. So as we start coming up with a schedule of how life is going to be in two different homes, we're all on the same page. And part of being on the same page is acknowledging that we're each your parents. We are both part of your lives. And we have to agree that we're going to follow these rules that we've helped create together moving forward. So it makes it less likely for a child to say, well, I'm going to, I don't have to go if I don't want to, and that kind of thing. So I love that what you're talking about is exactly this somewhat newer model that we haven't heard of, that talks about how the therapeutic part starts first, and that guides the legal process with a mediator who's checking back in. Okay, we're going to come up with a temporary plan. Is this working for everybody? What are the goals? What are the skills that people need to learn? And it's like a fluid thing that then, as things start getting better in the mental health area with the family, the mental health professional's job starts decreasing, and then the legal one increases more with like, now let's start drafting schedules, but it's based on what's working, not just, again, some strangers making decisions saying, now you have to do this, and you can only see your kids during these days, you can only talk to your kids for these 10 minutes, without even considering what that natural culture of the family has been.
Right. And that's called pre-divorce counseling, and that's been around for, decades as well. Although I think involving the kids is kind of a newer twist. I haven't seen that. Uh, and I think that can be good depending on how it is approached. I know, and this isn't quite the same thing, but for example, there used to be this uh, very pervasive misinformation that when a child turned a certain age, they would get to choose who they were going to live with.
That's still
And
out
of course, the courts don't do that for the most part because, number one, if a child says, well, I want to live with mom, and then it ends up they live with dad, they feel very unheard and disrespected, and as if what they said didn't matter. And also, the courts don't want to give that much power and control to a child, whether a teenager or whatever. And I used to tell my clients, I said, they would say, oh, you know, what if they want to live with me or whatever, when we were having this discussion, I would say, don't worry. When they become a teenager, they're going to want to, they're going to that's just the nature of teenagers. They're going to try and play you guys off and try to go live with you or live with her or whatever. But so involving the kids in the pre-divorce counseling is, I think, like I said, a newer twist that I had not seen. But pre-divorce counseling was absolutely part of it. And, basically to discuss how to be in divorce, which goes back to what I was saying about that you're modeling for your kids how to be in divorce. And I wish more people would think about that, because if they thought about that at the outset, if instead of, even in the middle of their age, if they thought, okay, is this how I want my children to act when they grow up and they divorce with my grandchildren? And if people would just think of that, like, wow, my kids are watching what I'm doing. I am modeling how to be in divorce. I think at least some of what goes on might, calm down.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to hit you with a case study. So, and this is this is something that I'm so excited to get your opinion on, because I'm always thinking, what practical, actionable advice? I know it's not legal advice. You can't give legal advice, but what would you suggest for something like this? So this family is going through a divorce. The mother has kind of been cast out, has a very tiny amount of legal custody at this point, and there's two teenagers who are very angry with the way that the separation happened. It was a long-term marriage, more than 20 years. The court decided that the kids should choose in terms of the therapeutic intervention, I think, or rather, sorry, I should correct it. Reunification therapy has been ordered. They're doing the cut the cake thing. The other side was told that they get to choose, and our client would get to decide, but the people that the other side suggested are like out of business, and it's impossible. So our client is trying to maybe come up with a couple of names. But when I talked to her earlier today about this idea with getting maybe some co-parenting counseling, even though it's a little bit later in the game, it's not I mean, they're in the middle of it and bad things have happened. What I want to know, how can she direct her lawyer to get proper relief so that maybe there can be some effective co-parenting counseling with somebody who does specialize in alienation? Like, what do you say? Because her lawyer doesn't have any experience. We always imagine that judges might not understand exactly what's going on. Like, we want to teach our clients something called taking strategic oversight and saying, here's my idea for a resolution that might be able to work. Like, where should she begin with starting this?
Okay, well, first of all, as I told you, I would say this is not legal advice.
Right.
But honestly, she should look for another lawyer who has experience with this.
Really?
I mean, okay, I'm not gonna say she should, but were it my client, or were it me, I mean, as soon as you said that her lawyer does not have a lot of experience with this, then why, find another lawyer.
Mm,
Find a lawyer who has experience in this, and make sure that it's a lawyer who um, is not the comes out gun blazing type,
right.
because a lot of the lawyers with experience with high conflict, that's they're bulldogs, and what you really want is a lawyer who knows how to, mediate and throw, oil or under what's the phrase? Oil on troubled water? That doesn't even make sense. But anyway, who knows how to bring the temperature
Yeah.
down, because it is always bad for the kids to be in the middle of a high conflict situation. And it is always best for the kids to be able to work something out outside of court.
Mm-hmm.
And so if her lawyer doesn't even know such basic things as, who are some good co-parent counselors or how to find them, I think that's problematic.
Yeah.
I think her lawyer is probably a very nice person.
Right.
And I suspect that she just doesn't really, either the thought of getting a better lawyer hasn't crossed her mind or been suggested to her, because people don't realize they can change lawyers, or for some reason she is rejecting that if it has been suggested to her because she doesn't want to hurt his or her feelings, or I mean, I don't really know. I don't know the situation.
Yeah.
But I mean, and if she really is adamant about not changing lawyers, then she needs to self-advocate. She needs to research and find some counselors and have her lawyer suggest them to his lawyer. And if they reject all three, also saying, saying very politely, hey, the counselors that your guy suggested, it turns out they are no longer in practice. So we have researched these three, see if one of them meets your guy's approval, and if not, have him suggest three more. And at some point, either they will end up in front of a counselor, or it will become crystal clear that their guy is just stalling.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you can take all of that correspondence and file a motion to have the court order co-parent counseling.
Yeah. All
But
right.
again,
Great.
if her lawyer doesn't know any of this, then he's not the right lawyer for her, no matter how nice he may be.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I'm so thrilled that that sounds like exactly what, and we don't give legal advice either because we're not attorneys, but that's the exact advice we gave, other than like maybe choosing a different lawyer, but self-advocacy, researching it, being like the proactive problem solver, figuring out what the appropriate resolution would be like. And I'm so glad you're on the same page with co-parent counseling.
But here's the thing. The trap that she can't fall into is, generally speaking, lawyers hate it when their clients say, do X, Y. I did all this research, I got my law degree from Google and
AI
here's
now.
what, and here's what, I want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, lawyers hate that because, often rightly so, lawyers sort of know what is and isn't acceptable to the court, for example.
Yeah.
So she has to be, really careful. When I say self-advocacy, it's like, do the research, but also be very careful in how you present that to the lawyer. Like, not, well, because nothing's happening, I did all this research and here's what I found. But more like, hey, how about we do this? And I did the legwork and found a few co-parent counselors. And would you please suggest them? So in other words, she's kind of coaching her attorney rather
Right.
than saying, you stupid person, this
Yeah.
is what we should have done.
No, of course. Of course. Yeah. All right. Awesome. I know we're getting really low on time and I didn't finish. So I think I'm just going to pause and we're going to have you back, Anne, to like continue this conversation. But in the meantime, how can people find you? How can they find all your writing?
Okay, well, so the way they can find me and what I'm doing now
Mm-hmm.
would be either on Facebook. I am Ann P. Mitchell, ESQ, pretty much everywhere. They can sign up for my Substack, which is where I do my main journalism. However, in this context, I mean, they can find my book on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
I really better look up that subtitle. But if they just search "They're Your Kids Too" and Ann P. Mitchell, it will come up. There are a couple of other things that, that say "Your Kids Too," but none of them have Ann P. Mitchell. And I don't think I even told you about this just because it didn't come up, but they can find our resources that have to do with parenting at dadsrights.org,
Okay.
which is a pretty old website that hasn't been updated, but the information on it is just as, current today. And there's a page about how to find a good lawyer for, and, it all says dads, but you can just insert, non-custodial parents.
Okay.
And then, I told you about my TV show, and I think that's a pretty good resource. That's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Fathers Are Parents Too, Ann P. Mitchell.
Yes.
So that's where they can find me. Thank you for asking.
Oh, so, and I mean, like I said, I was rabid at the beginning and I'm still like, oh, there's all these things I want to ask her, but we're out of time. So if you don't mind, I definitely would like to continue this conversation.
Absolutely. I am happy to come back anytime. I actually love talking about this because it's a part of my professional life where I feel like I did the most good. I think, as I told you, there are, the kids are grown now and they're finding me on Facebook and saying, what you did for us, oop, goosebumps. So I'm always happy to talk about this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. And
My
I'll see you soon.
pleasure. I hope so.